The dust kicked up around Diana Kellerman's worn boots as she stumbled into Bozeman, Montana territory, clutching her side where the stagecoach accident had left her bruised and battered. The late afternoon sun of August 1878 beat down mercilessly on her dark hair, and her throat felt like sandpaper as she made her way down the main street, hoping someone might show her a kindness she had rarely known in her 22 years of life. The stage had overturned 3 miles back, the driver killed instantly, and she had walked the rest of the way, leaving behind the wreckage and her few possessions, carrying only a small carpet bag that had somehow survived intact. A tall man in his mid-20s stepped out of the general store, his broad shoulders blocking the sunlight for a moment as he noticed her swaying on her feet. Franklin Wells had the weathered look of someone who had spent every day of his adult life working the land, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the Montana sky. He dropped the supplies he had been loading onto his wagon and rushed forward just as Diana's knees buckled. "Madam, you need help," he said, catching her before she hit the ground. His strong arms steadied her, and she looked up into a face that held genuine concern rather than the calculating look she had grown accustomed to in her years working as a seamstress in various frontier towns. "The stage," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "It overturned. The driver, he's dead. I walked from there." Franklin's jaw tightened. "That's a long way in this heat. Come on, let's get you to the doctor." "I have no money for a doctor," Diana said, pulling back slightly despite the way her vision was beginning to blur at the edges. Pride had been one of the few things she could afford to keep over the years. "Did I ask if you had money?" Franklin's voice was firm but not unkind. He guided her toward a building with a painted sign that read, "Dr. Samuel Morrison, Physician and Surgeon." The doctor, a middle-aged man with spectacles perched on his nose, examined Diana thoroughly while Franklin waited outside. She had a badly bruised rib, cuts and scrapes on her hands and arms, and was severely dehydrated. Dr. Morrison gave her water, cleaned her wounds, and wrapped her ribs with practiced efficiency. "You were lucky," he said as he finished. "Another hour in that sun and we might be having a different conversation. Where are you staying in town?" Diana's silence was answer enough. The doctor exchanged a glance with Franklin, who had stepped back inside. "My ranch has a spare room," Franklin said. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, is there. It would be proper, and you need somewhere to recover." "I cannot impose on strangers," Diana protested, though the offer tugged at something deep in her chest, a longing for safety she had pushed down for so long she almost did not recognize it anymore. "You are not imposing." "I am offering." Franklin's blue eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Please, at least until you are well enough to make other arrangements." The ride to the Wells Ranch took nearly an hour, and Diana spent most of it trying not to stare at the man beside her. Franklin drove the wagon with easy confidence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or commenting on the land. His ranch, he explained, covered several thousand acres. He raised cattle primarily with some horses. He had inherited the land from his father 5 years ago and had been building it up ever since. "You have family helping you?" Diana asked, curious despite herself. "No family left," Franklin said simply. "My parents died of fever in '73. I have ranch hands who help with the work." "About 6 men year-round, more during roundup and branding season." Diana nodded, understanding the loneliness in his words. "I have no family either. My parents died when I was 16. A fire in the boarding house where we lived in Denver. I was at work." "I am sorry," Franklin said, and the sincerity in his voice made Diana's throat tighten. The ranch house came into view as they crested a hill, and Diana caught her breath. It was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, clearly built to last, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding snow even in August. The land rolled out in every direction, dotted with cattle that looked like small brown specks from this distance. "It is beautiful," Diana said softly. A smile touched Franklin's lips. "It is home, Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She clucked over Diana like a mother hen, immediately taking charge of getting her settled in a spacious room on the second floor. The room had a large bed with a handmade quilt, a washstand with a porcelain pitcher and bowl, and windows that looked out over the pastures. "You just rest now, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, helping Diana out of her dusty, torn dress and into a clean nightgown that she produced from somewhere. "I will bring you up some soup and bread. Mr. Wells said you had quite the ordeal." Diana wanted to protest, to insist she could help somehow, but exhaustion crashed over her in waves. She managed a few spoonfuls of the soup Mrs. Patterson brought before sleep claimed her. The next few days passed in a blur of rest and recovery. Diana learned that Mrs. Patterson came daily to cook and clean but returned to her own small house in town each evening, where she lived with her widowed sister. Franklin was often out working the ranch during the day, but he checked on Diana each evening, bringing her books from his collection or simply sitting in the chair by the window and telling her about his day. "You do not have to entertain me," Diana said one evening, about a week after her arrival. She was sitting up in bed, feeling much stronger, her bruises fading to yellow-green. "I know I do not have to," Franklin said. He was still in his work clothes, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "I want to. It is nice to have someone to talk to at the end of the day besides my horse." Diana laughed, the sound surprising her. She could not remember the last time she had laughed so freely. "I imagine your horse is a good listener." "He is, but his conversation skills leave something to be desired." Franklin's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "How are you feeling? Dr. Morrison said he would stop by tomorrow to check on you." "I feel much better, well enough that I should start thinking about what comes next." The words tasted bitter in Diana's mouth. She did not want to think about leaving this place, this unexpected sanctuary, but she could not stay indefinitely without purpose or means. Franklin was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady on her face. "What were you planning to do before the accident?" "I was traveling to Helena. A woman there needed a seamstress, or so I heard. I am good with a needle and I hope to find steady work." Diana smoothed the quilt with her hands. "All my tools were in my trunk on the stage, though. Everything I owned." "We can send someone to salvage what they can from the wreck," Franklin said. "And if you need work, well, I have a proposition." Diana's heart sank slightly. She had heard propositions before from men, none of them honorable. Franklin must have seen something in her expression because he quickly continued, "Not that kind of proposition. A job. Mrs. Patterson has been saying for months that the curtains in this house are falling apart, and half the men's shirts are more patch than original fabric. If you would be willing to stay on as a seamstress, I could pay you fair wages and you would have room and board here. There is plenty of work, and Mrs. Patterson could use the company during the day. You would hire me, just like that?" Diana asked, studying his face for any sign of an ulterior motive. "I would. You need work and I need someone with your skills. It seems like a practical arrangement." Franklin stood as if suddenly aware he had been sitting in her room too long. "Think about it. There is no rush." After he left, Diana lay awake for a long time, watching the stars through her window and thinking about the kindness of strangers, or perhaps the kindness of one particular stranger, Dr. Morrison declared her well enough to resume normal activities the next day, and Diana accepted Franklin's offer. She started slowly, first mending some of the ranch hands' shirts while sitting on the porch, enjoying the late summer warmth. The men were polite, but kept their distance, sensing perhaps that their boss had taken a particular interest in the young woman's welfare. Mrs. Patterson was delighted to have another woman around. As they worked together in the kitchen one afternoon, the older woman kneading bread while Diana hemmed new curtains for the parlor, Mrs. Patterson shared the local gossip and the history of Franklin's family. His parents were good people, Mrs. Patterson said, her hands working the dough with practiced efficiency. They built this ranch from nothing. When they died, poor Franklin was only 20 years old, suddenly responsible for everything. A lot of folks thought he would sell and move to the city, but he proved them wrong. Worked himself to the bone building this place up. He seems very dedicated, Diana said carefully, threading her needle. He is that. Also lonely, though he would never admit it. Had a girl once about 3 years back. Sarah Miller was her name. Pretty thing, daughter of a banker in town. They were courting for near about 6 months before she broke it off. Diana tried to keep her voice neutral. What happened? She wanted city life, parties, society. This ranch was too isolated for her, and Franklin was not about to give it up. He has not shown interest in anyone since, until... Mrs. Patterson trailed off, giving Diana a meaningful look. Until what? Diana asked, though she felt heat rising in her cheeks. Until he brought you here. I have been working for him for 3 years, and I have never known him to invite anyone to stay in this house, let alone offer them a job on the spot. Mrs. Patterson shaped the dough into loaves. He watches you, dear, when you are not looking. Watches you like a man who is trying to figure out if he is dreaming. Diana's hands stilled on the fabric. She had noticed Franklin's attention, the way his gaze would linger on her face, the way he always seemed to find reasons to be near her. She had also noticed her own heart's traitorous response, the way it quickened when she heard his boots on the porch, the way she found herself listening for his voice. I have nothing to offer a man like him, Diana said quietly. I am just a seamstress with no family, no dowry, no prospects beyond the wages he pays me. Love does not care much about dowries, Mrs. Patterson said wisely, and Franklin Wells is not the kind of man who judges a person's worth by their bank account. That evening, Franklin asked Diana to take a walk with him after supper. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed to set the mountains on fire. They walked past the barn and out toward a creek that ran through the property, neither speaking, just enjoying the cooling air and the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. I wanted to thank you, Diana said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. For everything you have done for me, taking me in, offering me work, treating me with such kindness. I do not know how I can ever repay you. Franklin stopped walking and turned to face her. The dying light caught in his blonde hair, making it look almost golden. I do not want repayment, Diana. I want you to be happy here. Are you? Happy, I mean. Yes, Diana said and realized she meant it completely. Happier than I have been in a very long time. Since before my parents died, maybe. Good. Franklin smiled, then seemed to gather his courage. Diana, I know you have not been here long, and maybe I am speaking out of turn, but I find myself thinking about you all the time. Wondering what you are doing, hoping to hear you laugh, looking forward to our conversations in the evening. I would like to court you properly, if you would allow it. Diana's heart hammered in her chest. She wanted to say yes immediately, to throw caution to the wind and let herself fall completely for this good, kind man. But there was something he needed to know, something she had been carrying like a stone in her heart since she was 19 years old. Franklin, there is something I need to tell you first, something about me that might change your mind. I doubt that, Franklin said gently, but I am listening. Diana took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his eyes. 3 years ago, I was very ill, a fever that nearly killed me. I was in the hospital for weeks, and when I recovered, the doctor told me that the fever had damaged me inside. He said I would never be able to have children. The words hung in the air between them. Diana watched Franklin's face, waiting for the disappointment, the retreat. What man wanted a wife who could not give him children, especially a rancher who needed sons to inherit his land? But Franklin's expression did not change except to soften with compassion. He reached out and took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her skin. "Diana, look at me," he said. When she raised her eyes to his, he continued, "Do you think that changes how I feel about you? Do you think I am asking to court you because I am shopping for a broodmare?" "Most men want children," Diana said, her voice shaking slightly. "Heirs. Someone to carry on their name." "I am not most men," Franklin's voice was firm. "And yes, I thought someday I might have children, but what I want more than that is someone to share my life with. Someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone to laugh with, someone to build a future with. If that future does not include children of our own blood, then we will find other ways to fill this house with love." Tears spilled down Diana's cheeks, and Franklin gently wiped them away with his thumbs. "You mean that? Truly? I have never meant anything more in my life." Franklin pulled her closer, and Diana went willingly into his arms, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "There are orphans who need homes, children who need love. If we want a family, we will have one. But even if it is just the two of us for the rest of our days, that would be enough for me. You would be enough for me." Diana lifted her face to his, and Franklin kissed her softly, tentatively, a question and a promise all at once. She kissed him back, letting herself believe for the first time that perhaps she could have this, could have happiness and love and a future. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Diana's life. Franklin was attentive but respectful, always mindful of her reputation. They took long walks in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride, laughing gently when she clung to the saddle horn in terror the first few times, then beaming with pride when she finally cantered across a meadow on her own. Diana made him new shirts, embroidering his initials on the cuffs in thread she had purchased with her wages. She learned to cook his favorite foods from Mrs. Patterson, who was thrilled to play matchmaker. The ranch hands grew accustomed to seeing the boss and the seamstress together, and several of them made comments to Franklin about when he was going to make it official. One October evening, nearly 2 months after Diana had first arrived in Bozeman, Franklin took her back to the creek where they had first kissed. The aspens had turned gold, and the air had the crisp bite of approaching winter. He had packed a picnic, and they sat on a blanket watching the water flow past. "Diana Kellerman," Franklin said, setting down his coffee cup and taking her hand. "These past months with you have been the best of my life. You make me laugh, you challenge me. You make this house feel like a real home instead of just a place I sleep. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards, but out here, people learn to recognize a good thing when they find it and hold on tight. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the person I grow old with?" Diana's vision blurred with happy tears. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Franklin, I will marry you." The ring was a simple gold band with a small sapphire, the same color as the Montana sky. It fit perfectly. They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, and when they finally pulled apart, both were grinning like fools. I should probably ask you properly, in front of witnesses, Franklin said. Make sure the whole town knows you are spoken for. The whole town already knows, Diana laughed. Mrs. Patterson has undoubtedly told everyone within a 50-mile radius. They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Bozeman. Mrs. Patterson cried through the entire service. The ranch hands all came, cleaned up and wearing their Sunday best. Several townspeople who had grown fond of Diana attended as well, including Dr. Morrison and the owner of the general store where Diana had bought her sewing supplies. Diana wore a dress she had made herself, simple but elegant, in cream-colored silk that Franklin had ordered specially from San Francisco. Franklin wore a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, looking so handsome that Diana's breath caught when she saw him standing at the altar. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Franklin kissed her thoroughly, not caring who was watching. The small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration at the ranch afterward was lively and warm. Mrs. Patterson had outdone herself with the food, and someone had brought a fiddle. They danced in the parlor, Franklin's arms strong around Diana's waist, both of them laughing as he spun her around. Later, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Franklin carried Diana up the stairs to the room that had been hers but was now theirs. He set her down gently, his hands shaking slightly as he began unbuttoning the tiny buttons down the back of her dress. "Are you nervous?" Diana asked softly, reaching up to loosen his tie. "Terrified," Franklin admitted with a shaky laugh. "I want everything to be perfect for you." Diana cupped his face in her hands. "It already is perfect. You are perfect." They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies and finding joy in the discovery. Afterwards, Diana lay in Franklin's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to a normal rhythm. "I love you, Mrs. Wells," Franklin murmured into her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Wells," Diana replied, smiling in the darkness. Their first winter as husband and wife was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes kept them inside for days at a time. Diana did not mind. She spent her time sewing, reading, and learning the account books for the ranch. Franklin taught her about cattle management and horse breeding. They talked for hours, played cards by the fire, made love in the afternoons when the wind howled outside. In the spring, as the snows melted and the ranch came back to life, Diana brought up the subject that had been on her mind for weeks. "I have been thinking," she said one morning over breakfast, "about what you said about filling this house with love, about orphans needing homes." Franklin set down his coffee cup, his full attention on her. "Yes, there is an orphanage in Helena. I read about it in the newspaper. They are always looking for families to take in children." Diana twisted her napkin in her hands. "I thought perhaps we could write to them. See if there are any children who might need a home." Franklin's face lit up. "I think that is a wonderful idea. We have the room, certainly, and the means to provide for more than just ourselves." "You are sure?" Diana asked. "I know it is not the same as having your own children." "They would be our own children," Franklin said firmly. "Blood does not make a family. Love does." They wrote to the Helena orphanage that afternoon. The response came 3 weeks later, along with a visit from Mrs. Abigail Thornton, the stern but kind woman who ran the institution. She arrived in a wagon with 2 children, wanting to see the Wells Ranch for herself before making any decisions about placement. "I need to ensure these children are going to good homes," Mrs. Thornton explained as she accepted a cup of tea in the parlor. "Too many people think orphans are just free labor. We want to give them a real home," Diana said earnestly. "Love, education, a chance at a good life." Mrs. Thornton studied them both carefully. "I believe you mean that very well. I have brought 2 children with me, siblings. I prefer to keep families together when possible. Their parents died of cholera last year. The boy, Thomas, is 8 years old. His sister, Margaret, is 6. They are good children, well behaved, though Thomas can be protective of his sister to a fault. Could we meet them? Franklin asked. The children were waiting outside in the wagon, and when Mrs. Thornton called them, they climbed down hesitantly. Thomas was tall for his age, all gangly limbs and serious dark eyes. He held his sister's hand tightly. Margaret had the same dark eyes, with braids that needed retying and a dress that was clean but patched in several places. Diana knelt down to their level, her heart aching at the wariness in their faces. "Hello, Thomas. Hello, Margaret. My name is Diana, and this is my husband, Franklin. We are very happy to meet you." "Hello, madam," Thomas said quietly. Margaret just stared, half hiding behind her brother. "Are you hungry? Mrs. Patterson, our housekeeper, made cookies this morning. Would you like some?" Diana asked. Margaret's eyes widened slightly, and Thomas nodded. "Yes, madam. Thank you." Inside, the children sat at the kitchen table, each holding a cookie like it was made of gold. Diana and Franklin sat with them, asking gentle questions. Thomas did most of the talking, explaining that their papa had been a blacksmith and their mama had taken in laundry. They had lived in Helena until their parents got sick. "You know how to ride a horse?" Franklin asked Thomas. "No, sir, never learned." "Well, if you came to live here, I could teach you. I have a young mare who is very gentle. She would be perfect for learning." Thomas's eyes lit up for the first time. "Really, sir, really? And I could use someone to help me feed the chickens every morning. That is an important job. Think you could handle it?" "Yes, sir. I am a good worker. Mama always said so." Margaret finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are there other children here?" "Not right now," Diana said gently. "But if you and your brother came to live here, there would be. You would each have your own room, or you could share if you preferred. And there is a whole ranch to explore, with animals and creeks and wide open spaces." "And we would not have to leave?" Thomas asked, his young face far too serious. "Some people take children in and then send them back if they are too much trouble." Diana felt her heart break a little. "We would never send you back. If you came here, this would be your home for as long as you wanted it. Forever, if you chose." Mrs. Thornton stayed for 2 days, observing how Diana and Franklin interacted with the children. She watched Franklin teach Thomas how to curry a horse, the boy's face intent with concentration as he followed Franklin's instructions. She saw Diana help Margaret pick flowers in the garden, both of them laughing when a butterfly landed on Margaret's nose. On the morning of the 3rd day, Mrs. Thornton announced her decision. "I believe this is a good placement. The children clearly feel comfortable here, and you have both shown genuine care for their well-being. If you are still willing, I would like to leave them in your care." Diana had to blink back tears. "We are more than willing. We would be honored." The paperwork was signed, and just like that, Diana and Franklin became parents. Mrs. Thornton drove away alone, and Thomas and Margaret stood on the porch, holding hands and watching her go with mixed expressions of hope and fear. "Come on," Franklin said gently. "Let me show you your rooms. We can figure out later if you want to change anything about them." The transition was not without challenges. Thomas had nightmares that first week, crying out for his mother in his sleep. Diana or Franklin would go to him, sitting on the edge of his bed until he calmed down, never making him feel ashamed of his tears. Margaret was quieter, more watchful, clearly waiting for the other shoe to drop. But slowly, day by day, they began to settle in. Thomas followed Franklin everywhere, soaking up knowledge about the ranch like a sponge. Margaret attached herself to Diana, learning to sew and helping in the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson doted on both children, sneaking them extra cookies and praising their every accomplishment. One evening, about a month after the children had arrived, Diana was tucking Margaret into bed when the little girl looked up at her with those serious dark eyes. "Mrs. Diana, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. And you can just call me Diana, or—" She hesitated, not wanting to push. "Or whatever you feel comfortable with. Can I call you Mama?" Margaret asked in a small voice. "Thomas said we should not because you are not really our mama, but I want to. Is that all right?" Diana had to swallow hard against the lump in her throat. "Oh, sweetheart, I would be honored if you called me Mama. So honored." Margaret smiled, the first real smile Diana had seen from her. "Good night, Mama. Good night, my darling girl." Diana found Franklin in their bedroom, and when she told him what Margaret had said, he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "We are a family," he said in wonder. "A real family." "We are," Diana agreed, feeling a completeness she had never expected to have. Thomas took a bit longer, but one afternoon when he and Franklin were working on fixing a fence, the boy said casually, "Papa, can you hand me that hammer?" Franklin froze, then cleared his throat roughly. "Sure, son." From then on, they were Mama and Papa, and the house that had once echoed with emptiness was filled with the sounds of children's laughter and questions and arguments and joy. But Diana had not forgotten the other orphans, the ones still waiting for families. 6 months after Thomas and Margaret came to them, she and Franklin made a trip to Helena and returned with 2 more children. A 10-year-old girl named Sarah, who had been orphaned when her family's wagon overturned on the trail west, and a 7-year-old boy named James, whose parents had died in a mining accident. The house got louder and busier. Franklin hired more help, including a young teacher from town to come 3 days a week to educate the children. Diana sewed clothes and mended scrapes and dried tears and handed out hugs freely. She had never been happier. That winter, when the children were sledding down the hill behind the house, Franklin pulled Diana close on the porch where they were watching. "You know," he said, "when I asked you to marry me, I thought we would have a quiet life together. Just the 2 of us, maybe a dog or 2. Diana laughed. "Are you complaining?" "Not even a little bit." Franklin kissed the top of her head. "I am grateful. Every single day, I wake up grateful for the stage accident that brought you to me, for your courage in telling me the truth, for your big heart that wanted to share our home with children who needed one." "I am grateful too," Diana said, watching Thomas help Margaret to her feet after she tumbled off the sled, both of them laughing. "You said we would fill this house with love, and you were right." The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The children grew, learning to ride and rope and help with the ranch work. Thomas showed a natural aptitude for working with horses and announced at 15 that he wanted to be a horse breeder. Franklin helped him start his own small herd, teaching him about bloodlines and training. Margaret became an accomplished seamstress under Diana's tutelage, her tiny stitches even finer than her mother's. Sarah developed a love for reading and books, and Franklin built her a library in one of the upstairs rooms. James was the wild one, always getting into scrapes, but with a heart of gold that showed itself in unexpected moments of kindness. When Thomas was 18, a younger couple from town who had been unable to have children of their own approached Diana and Franklin about adopting. The Wells family helped them navigate the process, and soon another orphan found a home. Word spread, and over the next several years, Diana and Franklin became known throughout Montana Territory as people who would help orphans find families. They took in 3 more children themselves. A set of twin boys whose mother had died in childbirth and whose father had been unable to care for them, and a teenage girl who had been living on the streets of Helena after running away from an abusive uncle. The house that Franklin had built for his future family now rang with the voices of 8 children, all of whom called Diana and Franklin Mama and Papa with love and pride. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Franklin took Diana back to the creek where he had proposed. It was October again, the aspens gold and the air crisp. They were older now, with more gray in their hair and lines around their eyes from years of laughter and sun. "You remember what I said to you?" Franklin asked, holding her close. "When you told me you could not give me children." "You said we would fill this house with love," Diana replied, smiling up at him. "We did not we?" Franklin's voice was full of wonder. "Diana, you have given me everything I did not even know I wanted. A loud, chaotic, beautiful family. Children who look at us like we hung the moon. A home full of love and laughter." "We gave each other that," Diana corrected gently. "You could have chosen any woman in Montana Territory, Franklin Wells. Women who could have given you biological children, women with proper dowries and family connections. But you chose me." "Best decision I ever made," Franklin said firmly. "I love you, Diana. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Diana said, and kissed him as the autumn wind rustled the golden leaves above them. That evening, the family gathered for a special anniversary dinner that Mrs. Patterson and the older children had prepared in secret. The long table in the dining room was crowded with all 8 children, ranging in age from 7 to 21. Thomas had brought his new wife, Emily, a sweet girl from town he had married the previous spring. Margaret sat between Sarah and James, all of them arguing good-naturedly about who had done the most work on the meal. Franklin stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, and the table quieted. 10 years ago today, I married the love of my life. I thought I knew what happiness was, but I had no idea. Diana, you have made every dream I ever had come true and given me new dreams I did not know to wish for. And to all of you," he looked around the table at the children, "you have made our lives richer and fuller than we ever imagined. We are so proud to be your parents." "To Mama and Papa," Thomas said, raising his own glass, and the others echoed him. "To family," Diana added, her eyes shining with happy tears. "To family," they all chorused. After dinner, the younger children begged for the story of how Diana and Franklin had met, even though they had heard it dozens of times. Diana and Franklin obliged, taking turns telling about the stage accident, the walk into Bozeman, Franklin catching her as she fell. "And then Papa took you to the ranch even though you were strangers," Margaret said, smiling. She knew the story by heart. "He did," Diana confirmed, "because your Papa is the kindest man I have ever known." "Tell the part about the proposal," Sarah urged. Franklin laughed. "You all know that part." "We want to hear it again," James insisted. So Franklin told about the picnic by the creek, the ring, Diana saying yes. The children sighed happily, even though they had heard it all before. Later, when the children were in bed and Diana and Franklin sat together on the porch watching the stars, Diana reflected on how different her life could have been. "I used to think that not being able to have children made me less somehow," she said quietly. "Like I was broken. Incomplete." Franklin pulled her closer. "You were never broken. You were perfect exactly as you were. I know that now. And I know that these children are children. They were always meant to be ours. Not through biology, but through choice and love. We chose them and they chose us." "The best kind of family," Franklin agreed. 2 more years passed, full and happy. Thomas and Emily welcomed a baby girl, making Diana and Franklin grandparents for the first time. They wept with joy when Thomas placed the tiny infant in Diana's arms and said, "Mama, Papa, meet Catherine Diana Wells." Margaret married a young lawyer from Bozeman, a good man who made her laugh and treated her like precious treasure. Sarah left for college in the East, the first woman in the family to pursue higher education, funded by Diana and Franklin, who wanted all their children to have every opportunity. James, at 17, showed an interest in medicine after helping Dr. Morrison with an injured ranch hand. The doctor took him on as an apprentice, and James found his calling. The three youngest children were still at home, along with two new additions, siblings aged 5 and 3 whom Diana and Franklin had taken in just months before. The house was still full, still loud, still overflowing with love. On a warm summer evening in 1890, Franklin and Diana sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. They were in their late 30s now, still vital and strong, but beginning to feel the years of hard work in their bones. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if that stage had not crashed?" Franklin asked, his arm around Diana's shoulders. Diana considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I probably would have made it to Helena, found work as a seamstress. Maybe stayed there, maybe moved on to another town eventually, lived a quiet, lonely life." "I am glad the stage crashed," Franklin said. Diana laughed. "Franklin Wells, what a thing to say." "I mean it. I am sorry the driver died, and I am sorry you were hurt. But if that had not happened, you would not have walked into my life. We would not have this." He gestured to the ranch, the house, the sounds of children playing in the distance. "I would not have you." "I am glad too," Diana admitted, "even though it was terrifying at the time. Even though I thought I was going to die in that heat, it brought me to you and you gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Franklin corrected, echoing her words from years before. Inside they could hear Mrs. Patterson, who still came daily despite being well into her 60s now, calling the children to wash up for supper. There would be chaos at the dinner table, arguments over who got which chair, laughter and spilled milk, and probably at least one child trying to sneak food to the dog under the table. "We should go in," Diana said, but neither of them moved, content to sit together a moment longer in the golden light. "Diana," Franklin said suddenly, "I want you to know something. These 12 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. Every morning I wake up next to you is a blessing. Every child we brought into this home has been a joy. If I died tomorrow, I would die a happy man, knowing I got to spend my life with you." "Do not talk about dying," Diana said, touching his face gently. "We have many more years ahead of us. Grandchildren to spoil, children to see married and settled. I want to grow old with you, Franklin Wells, very old." "Then we will," Franklin said, covering her hand with his. "We will grow old together, surrounded by our family in this house full of love." And they did. Over the next 2 decades, Diana and Franklin saw all their children grown and settled. Thomas expanded his horse breeding operation until it rivaled his father's cattle business. Margaret and her husband moved to Billings, where he opened a law practice, and they had 3 children who visited the ranch every summer. Sarah became a teacher and eventually returned to Montana, opening a school for girls in Helena. She never married, saying she was too busy changing the world, but she was happy and fulfilled in her work. James became a doctor, taking over Dr. Morrison's practice when the older man retired. He married a nurse and they had 4 children, all of whom showed interest in medicine. The younger children found their own paths. 2 became ranchers, 1 became a minister, 1 opened a general store in Bozeman, and 1 moved to San Francisco and became a successful businessman. The youngest, the siblings who had come last, stayed closest to home, 1 working the Wells Ranch with Thomas, the other marrying a neighboring rancher's daughter. Through it all, Diana and Franklin remained at the heart of their family. The ranch house was always open, always welcoming, always full of grandchildren during summer months and holidays. Diana taught her granddaughters to sew, while Franklin taught his grandsons to ride and rope. They added rooms to the house over the years to accommodate visiting family members. The dinner table was extended twice to fit more people. The walls were covered with photographs and children's drawings and all the mementos of a life well lived and full of love. In the spring of 1908, when Diana was 52 and Franklin was 55, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The entire family gathered at the ranch, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now. There were over 40 people crowded into the house and spilling out onto the lawn. Thomas stood to make a toast at the massive outdoor celebration they had organized. "Mama, Papa," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, 30 years ago you married each other. But in doing so, you gave homes and hearts to dozens of children who needed families. You taught us what love really means, not just romantic love, though anyone who sees you together knows you have that in abundance. But the kind of love that opens doors, that makes room, that sees a need and fills it without being asked. He paused, looking around at his siblings, all of them nodding in agreement. You taught us that family is not about blood. It is about choice and commitment and showing up every single day. Every single one of us chose to call you Mama and Papa because you earned those titles. You loved us when we were unlovable. You believed in us when we did not believe in ourselves, and you gave us a foundation strong enough to build our entire lives on. There was not a dry eye in the crowd as Thomas continued. So here is to 30 more years, and to the legacy of love you have built. May we all be half as good at loving as you two have been. Franklin stood, his arm around Diana's waist, both of them overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. "Thank you," Franklin said, his voice rough with emotion. "But your mama and I, we are not special. We just recognize that love is not a finite resource. The more you give, the more you have. And you all, every single one of you, you gave us purpose and joy and meaning." Diana found her voice. "When I was a young woman, I thought not being able to have children meant I would never have a family. I thought it made me less than whole. But I was wrong. Standing here, looking at all of you, our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I have never felt more complete. You are our legacy, and we could not be more proud." The celebration went on late into the night, with music and dancing and stories told around the fire. Diana found quiet moments with each of her children, those private conversations where they shared their hearts and dreams. Franklin did the same, dispensing advice and wisdom gained from years of hard work and deep love. As the stars came out, Diana and Franklin slipped away from the party, walking hand in hand to their creek, the place where so much of their story had unfolded. The aspens rustled overhead, and the water babbled over the rocks just as it had 30 years before. "Are you happy?" Franklin asked, the same question he had asked her so many times over the years. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Diana answered, the same answer she always gave because it was always true. They stood together in the moonlight, reflecting on the journey that had brought them from that dusty street in Bozeman to this moment. A chance meeting that had turned into a lifetime of love, a confession that could have ended everything but instead had opened doors to a future neither had imagined. "I love you, Diana Wells," Franklin said. "I love you, Franklin Wells," Diana replied. Behind them, carried on the night breeze, they could hear the sounds of their family, their legacy, their house full of love. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Years continued to roll by like the Montana seasons, each one bringing new joys and some sorrows. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 78, and the whole family mourned the loss of the woman who had been grandmother to all the children. But her sister's daughter came to work at the ranch, carrying on the tradition. Franklin's hair turned completely white, and Diana's was streaked with silver. Their hands, once so strong and capable, developed arthritis that made some tasks difficult. But they adapted, helping each other with buttons and jars, making a game of their limitations rather than lamenting them. In 1915, the youngest of their children married, and Diana and Franklin found themselves alone in the big house for the first time in decades. The silence was startling at first. "It is so quiet," Diana said one evening at dinner, just the two of them at the long table. "Too quiet," Franklin agreed. "I miss the chaos." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. It was their son James, the doctor, with a problem. A young girl, age 9, had been orphaned when her parents died in a fire. She had no other family, and the orphanage in Helena was overcrowded. Could Diana and Franklin possibly consider taking her in, just temporarily, while James worked on finding her a permanent placement? Diana and Franklin looked at each other and smiled. They were nearly 60 years old, probably too old to be taking in children. But love had no age limit. "Bring her in," Diana said. "Let us meet her." The girl, Rebecca, was shy and traumatized, barely speaking for the first week. But Diana and Franklin had decades of experience with hurt children. They gave her space and time, along with gentle affection and patient understanding. Rebecca's stay, meant to be temporary, became permanent when no suitable placement could be found. At 9, she was young enough to need raising, but old enough to remember her parents and grieve them properly. Diana and Franklin helped her honor her memories while building new ones. Rebecca called them Grandma Diana and Grandpa Franklin at first, the closest she could come to the intimacy of Mama and Papa while still honoring her birth parents. That was fine with Diana and Franklin. What mattered was that she knew she was loved and safe. As Rebecca grew, she helped care for Diana and Franklin as they aged. When Franklin's back gave him trouble, Rebecca would help him with his boots. When Diana's hands hurt too much to sew, Rebecca would thread needles and do the fine work while Diana directed. By the time Rebecca was 16, Diana and Franklin were in their late 60s, slowing down considerably. The ranch was still operational, run primarily by Thomas and his sons now, but Franklin still went out every day to check on things, stubbornly refusing to fully retire. One evening in early autumn, Franklin came in from the barn complaining of chest pains. Diana, trying not to panic, sent Rebecca to fetch James. The doctor arrived quickly and examined his father, his face growing grave. "Papa, your heart is weak," James said gently. "You need to rest, take it easy. No more working from dawn to dusk." "I have been working from dawn to dusk since I was 15 years old," Franklin protested. "I would not know what to do with myself if I stopped." "You could enjoy your wife, your family, your grandchildren," James said. "You could sit on that porch you built and watch the sunsets. You have earned the right to rest, Papa." Franklin grumbled but agreed to take it easier. Diana enforced it strictly, recruiting Rebecca and Thomas to make sure Franklin did not overdo it. For a few months, Franklin seemed to stabilize, content to sit on the porch and direct operations from his rocking chair. But in January of 1922, Franklin caught a cold that turned into pneumonia. James moved into the house to care for his father, and all the children came home to be with him. The house was full again, not with celebration but with vigil. Diana sat by Franklin's bedside day and night, holding his hand, telling him stories of their life together. Sometimes he was lucid and would respond, squeezing her hand or smiling at a memory. Other times he drifted, lost in fever dreams. On a cold January night, with Diana beside him and all their children gathered in the room, Franklin opened his eyes clearly for the first time in days. "Diana," he whispered, and she leaned close. "My beautiful Diana, I need to tell you something." "I am here," Diana said, tears streaming down her face. "I am right here. That day you told me you could not have children, you were so scared. Do you remember?" "I remember," Diana said. "I told you we would fill this house with love. Did we do that?" Diana looked around at their children, all grown now, all with tears on their faces, all gathered because they loved this man so deeply. "Yes, my love, we did that." Franklin smiled, peaceful and content. "Good, that is good." His eyes found each of his children. "I love you all. Take care of your mama." "We will, Papa," Thomas promised, his voice breaking. Franklin's gaze returned to Diana. "Every day with you was a gift. Every single day I will wait for you wherever I am going, and when you get there we will start all over again." "Franklin," Diana sobbed, but he squeezed her hand gently. "Do not be sad. We had a beautiful life. Be happy, Diana. Keep filling this house with love. Promise me." "I promise," Diana whispered. Franklin closed his eyes with a smile on his face, his hand still holding Diana's, and slipped away peacefully. The grief was overwhelming, but Diana was not alone in it. Her children surrounded her, holding her up when she could not stand on her own. The funeral was the largest Bozeman had ever seen, with people coming from all over Montana to pay their respects to the man who had helped so many orphans find homes, who had built a legacy of love and compassion. Diana thought she might die of heartbreak in those first weeks. She had been with Franklin for over 40 years. How was she supposed to continue without him? But she had promised him she would keep filling the house with love, and Diana had never broken a promise to Franklin in her life. She was not about to start now. So she got up each morning, even when it hurt. She had breakfast with Rebecca, who at 17 was preparing to go to college but had delayed her plans to stay with Diana. She visited with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued her work helping James place orphans with families, using her decades of experience to match children with parents. One day, about 6 months after Franklin's death, Thomas came to her with a situation. A young widow with 3 small children was about to lose her homestead. Her husband had died in a farming accident, and she could not work the land and care for the children on her own. She was facing eviction and had nowhere to go. "The house has so many empty rooms now," Thomas said carefully. "I thought maybe she and the children could stay here, help you with the upkeep, and you could help her with the children. Just an idea." Diana considered it. The house was indeed too big and empty now, echoing with memories and silence. And she had promised Franklin she would keep filling it with love. "Bring her to meet me," Diana said. The widow, Anna, was a woman of 30 with work-worn hands and eyes full of worry. Her 3 children, all under age 6, clung to her skirts. Diana saw herself in Anna, saw the fear and uncertainty of a woman alone in a harsh world. "You and your children are welcome to stay here as long as you need," Diana said. "No rent, no obligation, just company and help around the house." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Madam, I cannot take charity." "It is not charity," Diana said firmly. "It is family helping family. My husband and I built this house to be filled with love and people. It is too empty now with just me and my granddaughter. You would be doing me a kindness." Anna and her children moved in the next week. The house came alive again with the sounds of young voices and running feet. Diana found purpose in helping Anna, in teaching the children their letters, in being grandmother to 3 more little ones who needed her. Rebecca left for college that fall, but she came home every holiday to find the house bustling with activity. Anna proved to be an excellent cook and housekeeper, and she and Diana became close friends. Eventually, Anna married one of Thomas's ranch hands, a widower himself, and they built a house on the property. But Diana's connection to Anna's children remained strong. The years passed, and Diana grew older. She walked with a cane now, her hands too twisted with arthritis to sew much anymore, her hearing not what it once was. But her mind remained sharp, and her heart remained open. She lived to see Rebecca graduate from college and become a teacher, following in Sarah's footsteps. She lived to see all her grandchildren grown and settled, many with children of their own. She attended weddings and christenings, celebrations and funerals, always the matriarch of the sprawling Wells family. On her 80th birthday in 1936, the family threw a massive party at the ranch. There were over 100 people in attendance, all connected to Diana in some way. Children she had raised, grandchildren she had helped rear, great-grandchildren, and even a few great-great-grandchildren. Thomas, now 66 himself and white-haired, stood to make a toast. "Mama, you and Papa created something extraordinary. You took 2 broken hearts and made them whole. You took empty rooms and filled them with children who needed love. You took a world that told you that you were less because you could not have biological children, and you proved that love, real love, has nothing to do with biology and everything to do with choice and commitment." He gestured around at the crowd. "Everyone here, every single person has been touched by your love in some way. You are the heart of this family, Mama, and we love you more than words can say." Diana, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, looked around at the faces surrounding her. Some she had raised from infancy, others had come to her older, all bearing their own hurts and scars. She had loved them all, taught them all, given them all the best of herself. "Thank you," she said, her voice still strong despite her age. "Thank you all for the greatest gift anyone could ask for, the gift of family, of love, of purpose. Your Papa and I used to say that we would fill this house with love, and you, all of you, you are the proof that we did exactly that. I love you all." That night, after the party had ended and the house had quieted, Diana sat in the rocking chair on the porch that Franklin had built so many years ago. She could almost feel him beside her, could almost hear his voice in the wind. "We did it, Franklin," she whispered to the stars. "We filled this house with love just like you promised, and it was enough, more than enough. It was everything." Diana lived another 3 years, passing away peacefully in her sleep at age 83. She died in the big bed she had shared with Franklin for so many years, surrounded by photographs of their family, the quilt she had made for their first anniversary still covering her. At her funeral, the church could not hold everyone who came to pay their respects. Person after person stood to share stories of how Diana had changed their lives, how her love had saved them, how she had shown them what family really meant. She was buried next to Franklin on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky as blue as sapphires. Her headstone read, "Diana Wells, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. She filled this house with love." The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through Thomas's line. The house remained a gathering place for the family, a place where cousins met and stories were told, and the legacy of Diana and Franklin lived on. The story of the rancher who married the woman who could not give him children and filled their house with love, instead, became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that love is not about perfection or meeting others' expectations. It is about choosing each other every day, about building something beautiful out of brokenness, about opening your heart even when the world says you should close it. And in that house on the Montana ranch, where the mountains still touch the sky and the aspens still turn gold every autumn, you can still feel it. The love that Diana and Franklin built, the legacy they created, the proof that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, the ones we build with intention and care and unwavering commitment. Their story did not end with their deaths. It lived on in every child they raised, in every grandchild and great-grandchild who learned their values, in every person who heard their story and was inspired to love more openly, more generously, more completely. Franklin had promised Diana they would fill their house with love, and they had done exactly that. Not just the physical house on the Montana ranch, but the house of their hearts, the legacy of their lives, the family they built from nothing but love and determination and faith in each other. It was a promise kept, a life well lived, and a love story for the ages. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.